the Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever.
And welcome. This is Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, your host, and John Rubino is with us. And we've got almost too much material, and we appreciate all the emails and YouTube comments from all of you, and we try to get as many as we can. John, it's the second week of May, and banks are doing good now, right? We can forget about the banking crisis, move on to the next crisis, right?
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, the regional and local bank stocks are up now, like this whole thing is over. But unfortunately for them, it's nowhere near over because they still have all those bonds on their balance sheet that are down in price that they have to report, which means they have to put out some bad numbers going forward. And commercial real estate has just barely started to blow up, and that's a much bigger deal because those are legit losses. You know, these bonds they have on their balance sheets, if they just hold on to them, will resolve. You know, they'll pay off at the end, and they'll get the return with very little risk that they expected. But commercial real estate can actually can go down so far that the bank has to take a big hit on the loan. It might have to eat half of a loan on an office building or something like that, and that's everywhere out there right now. So these regional and local banks that do a lot of real estate lending are looking at massive losses on their commercial real estate portfolios that really aren't on the front burner yet. You know, nobody's really paying that kind of attention because there haven't been big numbers that banks have had to report. But it's just a matter of time before they do. And when they do, the numbers will be terrifying. Yeah, so the banking crisis will just move into another phase at some point here, and it'll be a much scarier phase when it happens.
So it's a rolling bank crisis. Goes from one sector to the next, and everything that's happening here presumably is going to be replicated around the world, right?
Europe might be worse than the U.S. in terms of the situation its banks are in. So it could be that they blow up first, and that's the thing that restarts our banking crisis here. There's no way to know. It's a mess everywhere, and you know, Japan. What can you say about Japan
and China? China, like their cure to insolvent loans is make more loans, right?
Yeah, China, and you know, because they're a dictatorship, they're able to do that really efficiently. They just tell the banks to start lending on a given topic, you know, into a given sector, and it happens. And so, yeah, China was able to engineer basically the biggest real estate bubble in human history, even bigger than Japan's in the 90s and bigger than the US in the 2000s. And it doesn't seem to be any solution for it because something like 70% of household net worth in China is tied up in real estate. So they either keep the bubble inflated or their entire economy implodes. And I don't think they really have any kind of an answer because, first of all, they're not market-based people in charge of the country. So they don't really have a sense of you know, how it works when asset prices change, and that clears the market at some point because there's a price or there's a market clearing price, things like that. They don't really get any of that. So they'll probably blunder into something big at some point. And we just can't know when or how much new debt will be created in the process.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 great YouTube channels that deal with China's bubble economy. One is called like China NCD or NTD, something like that. There's also Epic Times. They've got a couple of YouTube channels and podcasts that deal with it. And there's one called China Uncensored. And like, it's just really fascinating to see the real story on the ground there. Because just like everywhere else, you know, the China miracle came from increasing debt, increasing money supply geometrically. And just like we're seeing the limits of that in the United States, we're going to see the limits to it in China as well.
Yeah, it's been a 70-year experiment, and it's blowing up in our faces right now. We get to live through the end of the fiat currency experiment, which nobody should have to go through something like that, but it is fascinating. This is a piece of financial history that will live on as long as people are making decisions about their finances, because we did an experiment where we tried to see if it's possible just to hand governments unlimited printing presses. And in that way, the experts told us that if we just put PhDs in charge of the monetary system, that they would manage things and we would have low inflation and strong growth and stability forever. Turned out to be the opposite. We've got slow growth, spiking inflation, and growing instability because these idiots thought they knew what they were doing and they actually didn't. Actually, in my Substack, I'm working on an article now about the failure of the experts, because there's an argument going on in the comments section about whether people got stupid in the last 7 years, and that's why they won't take their vaccines and things. And my take is going to be that, we put our lives in the hands of experts in 1971, and we got monetary inflation, monetary instability. We got almost World War III kicking off here. We got open borders, and so the border towns in the U.S. are being just submerged in a tide of illegals coming in, and we've got big pharma basically able to take over the government and run or force us to take experimental medicines now. So in each case we had experts from the same class, Ivy League educated, very well off, very in tune with the wants and needs of other people in their class. We had them take over, and basically what they did is serve the interests of their class. It's not that they were incompetent as much as they were basically doing things with one set of people in mind. So monetary policy is, no matter what happens, monetary policy is lower interest rates, and increase government spending, which serves the rich at the expense of everybody else. And foreign policy is, hey, let's send a bunch of our soldiers off to die in every war that we can think of in order to enrich the military-industrial complex. It goes on and on like that. Healthcare policy is whatever makes the pharmaceutical companies richest. So we basically got a small class of people in charge of everything now. They're the experts. They have the PhDs. And the people who think that's a good idea are wondering why nobody trusts them anymore. And, so it's an interesting story. Again, another experiment, were we going to have fiat currencies? Let's try that. Are we going to put the world in the hands of a handful of PhDs and just let them run the show? Let's see how that turns out. Well, none of it turned out well. It's been a disaster almost across the board. And you can trace it back to this idea that a handful of smart people are capable of running big sections of the economy and of foreign policy, when in effect, and healthcare policy, when in effect they are absolutely unqualified to do stuff like that. And you give them that power and they screw up everything.
And I will trace this back to the Kennedy regime, the Kennedy administration. They brought on these guys, they called them the eggheads. And Kennedy said, hey, the way to run this government is get the smartest people in every profession and just give them free rein. And it worked
and then
so well.
During the Vietnam War, we had the best and the brightest running the Vietnam War, and they screwed everything up. But, you can trace this even further back to Plato's Republic, where they conclude that the best form of government is a philosopher king, where you take the smartest, best person, give them absolute power, and they will run things right. Well, we did a mini version of that here, where we didn't take the best person, but we took the smartest groups of people and put them in charge of everything, and assumed that they would do a great job because they're the smartest people. And it turns out that life is more complicated than the human brain is. And you can take the smartest person in the world, put them in charge of something, and they'll still be swamped by the complexity of the thing you want them to run. Only markets which is millions of free people, each making a decision on whatever it is you're doing in their own self-interest, that in the aggregate comes up with good policy. That's the only way to get good policy, even though it's a messy process. But you cannot just put people in charge and expect them to understand and manage a system as complex as the global financial system or global geopolitics or virology. None of that's possible with just smart guys making decisions. So it has to be run by markets. And see, we're learning all this now. We're figuring out that you can't have people in charge of the currency. So we have to go back to sound currency, some kind of a gold standard or other commodity standard where markets dictate the price of money and interest rates. And we'll have to have geopolitics in which people basically get to vote with their feet and with their pocketbooks. And lots of different countries get to compete on more or less level playing field, and policy evolves from that. It can't be dictated from above and imposed on everybody. We have to have policy become an emergent characteristic of the system, not something that's imposed by some dictator, some philosopher king. So this is a big revelation that's coming here. And it feels like it's coming fairly quickly, certainly in monetary policy. But if we survive our attempts to start World War III here pretty soon, maybe we'll find out that competition is better than dictatorship in global politics, too.
So true. So true. Well, obviously, something's going on here. The banks aren't out of the woods. Now, in Q1, we see central bank gold buying up 176% year over year.
Yeah. So what that is that's the central banks of the world realizing they screwed everything up. And they see an end to their fiat currencies and coming very quickly. So they're trying to load up on an asset that historically holds its value while mismanaged currencies just evaporate. So the central banks of the world are realizing they've screwed up. And they don't want to come out and admit it, because with a fiat currency system, all you've got is faith. So they can't admit that this experiment is ending catastrophically, because that would bring it about instantly. It would become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But what they can do is load up on assets that will hold up during the monetary reset that has to come. So you're seeing central banks, it's become a situation of don't listen to what they say, but watch what they do, because they are acting as if we've got a tsunami of inflation coming, the collapse of these fiat currencies, and gold and silver surviving and thriving and becoming the basis for the next monetary system. That's how they're acting. So don't listen to their press conferences where they say the banking system is sound and we see inflation as being well anchored. That's all just focus grouped nonsense that they trot out when they need to manipulate the markets. But their actions say they're terrified. And that's what we should be paying attention to.
And ignore their newspeak, as George Orwell would call it. It's all newspeak. And none of it has any truth to it whatsoever. But yeah, there's no way that they can admit that they were wrong about this. But they don't have to. We're on to the next. The next crisis will be so serious that no one will remember the last one. That's kind of where we've been heading, John. Each crisis is more serious than the last. And therefore, there's never a discussion about why it really happened, what enabled it to happen, and then we just move on to the last one until we get to the point where the can can't be kicked down the road anymore, and it looks like we're growing ever closer. And then nobody will remember. We won't need to have a discussion, and they'll just transition, right?
Yeah, well, that's what they've done so far. Every time they cause a gigantic crisis, the same guys get chosen to fix the crisis. So there's no reason to think that the next one won't be like that. Well, they'll engineer something. it'll be another pandemic, or it'll be a cyber attack, or it'll be an EMP attack, or any number of things. Some a gigantic financial crisis is
aliens.
The aliens might show up and say, you have to go back on the gold standard. Kerry,
that would be good.
Now, it's interesting, isn't it, that the aliens are now officially in existence. The government says, yeah, there's UFOs, blah, blah, blah. And at the same time that artificial intelligence has emerged as a real thing. In the sweep of human history, it's just very interesting that those two things would emerge in the same decade, maybe even the same year. We could actually meet the aliens at the same time we meet an artificial intelligence that is self-aware. And it would be a surprise to me if that was a complete coincidence. It's just an awfully big coincidence if it happens. So we'll see. We'll see what that means in the future, but I don't know.
Well, I'm relieved that Kamala Harris is heading the government's AI task force. Do you think she'll really be heading it, or will Chat GPT 4.5 be running it? That's what I want to know.
We've got to get some video of this, because we're going to have a human who cannot pass the Turing test talking to a machine that can pass the Turing test. So it's going to be embarrassing for our species, I think. But it's the idea of naming Kamala Harris to be the czar of something is a good way to hide it. We've seen so far. They put her in charge of the border, and she never went to the border. She never expressed an idea of any kind about immigration policy. And maybe that's the same thing they're going to do now. They'll put her in charge of AI, and that'll just bury the issue.
Like Obama, hey, he needed somebody to check up on Ukraine. He put Biden in charge of it. At least Biden had the good sense to cash in on it and make sure that all the members of his family were plush. It bothers me when I see a politician who can't recognize opportunities where they can cash in for themselves and their family. That's just not a good politician.
So if we can talk about this on YouTube, that's awesome, because it is fascinating that they took a guy like Biden, who is just this old school, totally corrupt politician who's in it to enrich himself and his family. And they gave him a portfolio that included Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And those guys just got together and milked that country. It's coming out now where the money came from that flowed into the Biden family accounts. And obviously Ukraine was a big conduit, but so was China. So if all of this stuff comes out, I think we're going to be shocked on one hand about the size of the numbers, and not shocked in any way on the other hand that this guy was doing stuff like that, because he's just that kind of a guy. He's just an obviously corrupt politician, so it shouldn't be a surprise. Put Donald Trump in charge and he's talking about buying Greenland or something like that, which is reasonable because he's a real estate guy.
Good idea.
Yeah. Yes, much better idea than the Ukraine war. But you put Biden in charge, and obviously he's going to solicit bribes all over the world, and that's apparently what he did. So isn't this going to be funny in this next election? We could have, for the first time ever, a presidential election between two candidates who are both under indictment at the time of the election. It's a time for firsts, I guess. Yeah.
And they might be in jail running their campaigns from prisons, like if they're in Atlanta or that other place, Marion, Indiana, that's the Supermax. And they have to have the presidential debates in the prison courtyard or the prison cafeteria, right?
This is a movie.
This would be great,
Kerry. HBO could do a movie with that plot where both of the candidates end up in the same Supermax, in Gen Pop of the same Supermax prison, and they have their debates in the in the cafeteria. Yeah. I like it.
I think okay. I think it could make it in today's Hollywood, but obviously they wouldn't be able to have two white guys be the candidates here. We'd have to multiculturalize.
Well, Denzel,
right?
Denzel would be
Denzel
excellent
Washington?
for one of them. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
because
I
he can
love
play a
it.
bad guy. He's done that
Yeah,
before.
he's good.
And maybe Tom Hanks or something like that. Give
Yeah,
him
Tom
make him an
Hanks.
all shucks country politician. And okay, hey, we're
All
writing
right,
a winning screenplay. You watch this happen now. Somebody's going to hear this. They're going to make a screenplay 2
I
years
got a
from
better
now. Yeah.
better idea. I'm going to have Chat GPT write the script.
Oh, you can get it to an agent in weeks if you do it that
Yeah.
way, right? Okay,
Right?
do it.
All
Do
right.
it.
All right.
Give me
50-50.
give me producer's credit. That's all I want.
Hey, you're
Yeah.
co-creator credit here.
Okay.
Sure. We hatched this scheme together. And maybe Keanu Reeves and Denzel.
He's not old enough. I guess his age doesn't matter. Just because our two guys are really old, it doesn't have to be two old guys in the script.
Both
What about Meryl Streep then? Let's make her one of them. Oh no, they can't be in the same. Oh wait, okay. Denzel declares himself to be female right before he gets put in prison,
so
and he and Meryl Streep are in the female prison, the women's prison. Yeah, okay.
All right. Well, then we cover virtually every minority and every interest group, so they'll all pay to see it.
Yeah, it's a diverse cast.
It's a Netflix.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got it. Well, hey, getting back to real TV that seems to be imitating art, have you taken a look at the Fox ratings? I mean, they are plunging down faster than Joe's favorability ratings.
Tucker Carlson was the only reason a lot of people ever tuned into Fox, and they're just finding that out now. His old slot is down by 75%. Fox is now smaller than MSNBC. This has got to be just killing them. They're used to being the 600-pound gorilla in cable news, and now they're approaching CNN numbers, which is CNN is going to cease to exist pretty soon unless they turn things around, and Fox is approaching that level of viewership. And especially in the, 18 to 35? 25 to 54, the demographic that does all the spending. That's all anybody cares about is that demographic. Yeah. And that's where...
I don't care about you and me.
Yeah, that's where Fox...
We're not spending money. We're old.
No, we just buy guns and silver coins now. We're not useful for an audience like that. But what was I going to say? I forget what I was going to say. Something to that effect, though, that they're imploding, and they can't ask Tucker Carlson to come back because they've already burned that bridge. They don't have anybody that anybody else is watching right now. So this is a huge deal. This is the Budweiser of news right now, right?
They could do a deep fake. They could do a deep AI fake of Tucker, because he's still under contract, so I guess he can't say anything.
Well, he can walk away from, it was like $20 million a year that he'd be walking away from. But the minute he set up his own whatever, his own YouTube channel, it would be 5 times as big as his audience was at Fox, and probably make him 3 or 4 times as much money. He'd be making Joe Rogan kind of money. So there's no reason to stay at Fox because he's not giving anything up. He's actually making money by leaving. So I think that's probably what will happen. He could do a presidential debate that would be, he would be the draw. So people who wouldn't normally watch a presidential debate would just tune in to watch Tucker Carlson. So
he is the next Rush Limbaugh. They put up a lot of people, but it's proof that he is the one. And in addition to what you said, John, that all of his viewers left en masse, dumped Fox. In addition, there's people who are upset because he was a quote unquote truth teller, and they just piled on because they just said, we want no part of this corporate outfit. What should really scare you is how many they lost. 20-30 billion dollars worth of value potentially by firing Tucker Carlson, and they had to know this was going to happen or have a good idea, but the fact that it was done anyway should scare everybody, because his truth telling and silencing him trumped all the financial interests that are built into the capitalist system. That's scary.
Yeah, it is funny when you start talking about why they fired him. It turns out there's like 8 different reasons that are completely valid from the point of view of Fox. That because he had RFK Jr. on, and they trashed the Ukraine war and Big Pharma, and he said that did he say the CIA killed
he said the CIA killed his uncle,
JFK?
probably his father too.
Yeah, so all of that, he said all of that on Fox, and Tucker Carlson, he himself was opposed to the Ukraine war. He was kind of an anti-vaxxer. He was anti-big pharma, and that right there is enough to get you fired from any major news channel in the country. But then there's the story about he had dinner with Rupert Murdoch, who's like 92 years old and was engaged. With Rupert Murdoch and his wife. And at the end of the thing, the wife said the Tucker Carlson was a messenger from God. And that freaked Rupert Murdoch out so much that he dumped his fiance and fired Tucker Carlson. Yeah, so there's a lot of stories that all seem plausible given the general insanity in the mainstream media market right now.
Hey, it's a wonder, but Tucker came out and said there was a certain 3-letter agency, and he got it on authority for somebody in the government that was involved in JFK's assassination. Take it for what you like. Certainly the story that we were spoon-fed was a big dish of manure and had zero truth to it. But we don't need to, we've been talking about this stuff, you and me, John, for 55 years already, right? So we don't need to get into it, but suffice it to say, you're not supposed to say these things on primetime TV, and the people that really run things did not take kindly to it.
Yeah, and if it was, because they could have foreseen that their ratings were going to go down, so they knew they were taking a risk. So whatever they, whatever the reason was, it was something that was big enough for them to risk what's happening right now. And as you said, what's happening right now is they're losing billions and billions of dollars of revenue and of enterprise value. So they had a really, really compelling reason for doing what they did. And hopefully a whistleblower is going to come forward pretty soon. Somebody who was taking notes in the room or something like that when the decision got made. Yeah. And so, because it's going to be interesting. I'm very interested in why exactly they did this, because it's hard to imagine something that's worth, let's say, $20 billion of enterprise value. It's got to be a serious thing for you to sacrifice that kind of money, which is what they did. And it doesn't look like there's any real solution. They don't have any other shows that are going to be the must-see TV that Tucker Carlson was. They've got some guys with high ratings, but nothing where the viewership and the following was that loyal, I think. So this might be a permanent change for Fox, and hopefully they had a good enough reason.
Hey, the brand was 40 plus years in the making. Millions of man hours, billions of dollars to build this brand. Don't forget, Fox News, News Corp owns the Wall Street Journal. They own multiple outlets, multi-billion-dollar company. But to destroy a brand in one day, literally bring itself to its knees, is that companies just don't do that for no reason. All right.
Well, a more general reason that I think is possible is that they have a certain outcome they're trying to engineer for the next election.
Mm-hmm.
And they concluded that Tucker Carlson would have made it harder. And if you take the military industrial complex and the big banks and big pharma and put them all together, $20 billion in losses at Fox News may not be that too high a price to pay in order to get the election outcome they want. So interesting thought. Yeah.
It's distressing. It's distressing because we've seen these kind of things happen. There's no allegations of sexual misconduct with him like there was with O'Reilly. And it just seems like he's a total Boy Scout. And I don't know if you saw the leaked videos it's like the guy is like, of course he's pissed off. Like they're screwing things up. They can't run their channels properly, or, like he's surrounded by charlatans and con men, and he's weaving his way through with a laugh, with a cackle,
Well, they went through every second of tape that they had of him. And if that's the best they could come up with, then that's shocking. You'd expect that any normal person who's on camera all the time, like a news talking head is, would have all kinds of stuff that taken out of context would look really bad. But none of this stuff made him look bad. They actually made him look, if anything, more relatable, right?
Yeah.
He comes off as a regular guy, and definitely not a sexual predator or a fascist or a racist or anything like that. So if that was their best shot, they might as well just give up, accept the outcome of the course that they've chosen, because he'll probably walk from Fox pretty soon. He'll probably start his own little media empire, and it'll be massive. And that'll be that. It's just, that's the new world of media that Fox has created. So be it. I think it's a better world, really, to have Tucker Carlson running around on his own, outside of the umbrella of a big media company. I think it's way more interesting. And he and Joe Rogan out there in the world are probably bigger than all of the mainstream media put together. And way more beneficial for general understanding of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, he has the ability to create the platform, probably go podcasting and talk radio as well, right? That's kind of it. And, Limbaugh could have done that at any moment. He could have just walked away from the radio and just done online stream. All right. And it wasn't even that big then, but he had the ability to do it. He didn't do it because he was loyal to talk radio. Carlson, he can do that. And nothing, there's nobody that could touch him, and people will pay. Even though I say we have this term in the US, oversubscribed, when you look through your credit card statement every month, and you see how many idiotic subscriptions you have, that's one that most people wouldn't have a problem with. My immediate response, if I have to buy a subscription to anything, any website, is no. All right. And then it'll be, prove to me why I need this. And, if you want to go save some money, just go through your credit card statement and see how many auto pays you have every month draining your bank account.
What?
You'll be shocked.
I think we're dedicated to the idea of alternative media, then there are people we should support, rather than just read their stuff for free. And Tucker Carlson, there's Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi, and a personal favorite of mine is Caitlin Johnstone. But Tucker Carlson would be on that list. I would toss $5 a month to a subscription for Tucker Carlson stuff. Heck. And so let's say 5 million people agree with that. Then that's $25 million a month for Tucker Carlson. And that's completely possible. If you look at how big the global audience is, a billion and some people speak English. So there's his potential audience. And the idea of 10 million or 5 million or 25 million or whatever out of that big audience, tossing him $5 a month is shit. It would be a shock if it didn't happen. And then, weren't you telling me about simultaneous translation now with AI?
Yeah.
So he
translated anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So he might have a global market then, where it's just instantly translated to whatever language you're listening via or speaking or whatever. And so he's got the 6 billion people then. And
what he could do is he could take one sponsor. All he has to do is take mypillow.com, Mike Lindell. It's the only sponsor he needs. Everything else will be subscription based, and it'll work out great. Hey, one more thing. So RFK Jr. running for president, and he's been they've classified him as a conspiracy theorist recently too, because of his anti-medical, vaxxing and all that stuff. But he's like 20% in the polls now against sleepy old Joe. Where does this end?
He's a really compelling candidate. There really isn't anybody on the list of Democrats that I would even think about voting for. They just have such a weak bench right now. But this guy is actually interesting enough that he might be a fun president, because he's very brave. You know, he'll go after big pharma and he'll pull us out of Ukraine in a heartbeat. So he'll do some things that will offset the crazy economic stuff that a left-wing Democrat would do. But I think he's got a chance. First of all, his name is Kennedy. There's 10% of the vote right there, just name recognition. He's on the correct side of the pandemic debate for a huge number of people. He's definitely on the correct side of the Ukraine thing for a huge number of people. And if he's running against somebody who's on the wrong side of all that stuff, which Biden is, getting to 51% is not that big of a stretch from 19% right now, especially if there are debates. Probably there won't be, because they know they can't do it. So whatever the Democrat National Committee has to do to prevent debates, they'll do it. But they can still have debates. Yeah. Kennedy and Marianne Williamson could debate on. They could go on your show and debate.
Yeah, hey, I'd love that.
Yeah, and it would be an extremely interesting debate that would get a ton of YouTube views, and would give those guys the kind of exposure that a third-party candidate needs, because really that's what they are now. They're running as independents, even though they're like Ron Paul back when he was quote unquote a Republican. These guys are running as independents within the Democrat Party, but still they're third-party candidates. And when you're a third-party candidate, you're starved for exposure. But this would do it. This would give them exposure. Or maybe Tucker Carlson could host those two debating.
That would be good. I love it. Hey, you know, when you look at it, if Trump is in jail anyway, then I guess RFK Jr. will have to visit Leavenworth or wherever they're holding Trump in order to have the debates, and Trump will be game, because they'll give him a break from ping pong or whatever they do in the evenings there before lights out. So, you know, it really opens the possibilities.
See, even if neither of them are going to be president, I would still love to see a debate between RFK Jr. and Donald Trump. That would be just a potential train wreck, but maybe really interesting too.
With Tucker Carlson moderating, it's worth
$10. That's a pay-per-view event.
Yeah,
where you pay $35 to get it on your cable.
Absolutely, man, and there'll be we'll be seeing those video clips for decades. So, well,
probably, yeah.
That is it for this week. Make sure you go over to John's Substack, rubinosubstack.com, link in the show notes, and we will pick up in a couple of weeks. For some reason, John, I don't think we will have any shortage of material come next time. Hey, if you've got a question, shoot us an email, write the comment below on the YouTube channel. It's kl@kerrylutz.com. And hey, don't forget, subscribe to your free newsletter, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. John, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
See you, Kerry.